We live in an age of distraction unlike any humanity has ever known. Every day there are millions of tiny shocks hitting our brains in the form of notifications and alerts, each one engineered to hijack our attention. We scroll endlessly, we watch endlessly, we consume endlessly, and the more we consume, the emptier it feels. The world has never been so accessible and interconnected, but somehow we have never felt so fractured and unable to sit with ourselves. This is the era of brain rot. Younger generations have made it overtly apparent that brain rot is an issue. This is not the usual generational slander from the older generations. When observing Gen Alpha and the younger Gen Z behaviors, there is less an instinct to point at those generations, and more an instinct to point to ourselves, the generations that influence them. It's less kids these days, and more what did we hand to kids that created this. When people talk about brain rot in the context of the youth, they're usually referencing how overstimulated, overstretched, and algorithmically conditioned their attention spans have become. The way we scroll social media and consume short-form content trained them from the earliest ages in dopamine maximization. Brain rot makes itself evident in many ways. Language itself decays into memes and shorthand, a sort of newspeak. These terms are already outdated, but looking back, we have seen kids have conversations and sometimes only respond with words like skibbity, Ohio, gyat, 6-7, or other meme phrases in ways that sound like nonsense to adults, because it is nonsense. The youth have been socialized into a mode where language itself is meant to be disposable and instantly recognizable as a shared joke. There is endless multitasking while consuming content. Watching a YouTube video while playing a Roblox game with TikTok running in the background can be typical for a Gen Alpha kid. They've grown up in an attention economy so fast-moving that one stream of entertainment feels incomplete without another to stack onto it. Irony and sincerity blurs. Brain rot humor is deliberately bad. It's low-effort edits, strange AI voices, and random sound effects. However, this slop is consumed sincerely. Kids laugh at the absurdity, but they also use these sounds and jokes in their real-life conversations. Reality and parody have morphed into one stream of comprehension. This is short-form addiction. For younger generations who came of age just as TikTok and Shorts hit peak cultural dominance, the inability to sit through a movie without checking their phone is striking. They've been neurologically wired to expect stimulation every few seconds. We point to Gen Alpha as being iPad kids, but the truth is that we are all iPad kids now. Older generations will get addicted to endless scrolling in the same way a child will, flushing away hours of their day to consuming the cheapest, most low-effort content. They'll scroll through AI slop believing it's real, pretending it's real. They're just as prone to brain rot as anyone. But this is not even anything new. My gym has 30 televisions mounted across the walls, all playing different cable stations. It is truly like peering into different realities, like an interdimensional cable. I get a glimpse of the content that baby boomers are consuming. I learn about their media diets. The most shocking things I see are the news channels. The 24/7 news cycle was the original brain rot machine, flashing breaking news alerts that never truly broke anything meaningful. Ticker tapes endlessly sliding across the bottom of the screen. Pundits frantically yelling over each other in a rush to the most shocking soundbite. It created the same fragmented attention span, the same sense of overstimulation, the same cycle of dependency. What TikTok achieves with jump cuts and ironic meme sounds, cable news achieved with urgent graphics and panel fights, all crammed in between pharmaceutical commercials on ways to treat your chronic depression and erectile dysfunction. Of course, each generation tends to frame the newest medium as the corrupting one. In reality, it's just the latest form of the same underlying mechanism. Kids are not uniquely broken by iPads any more than their parents were uniquely broken by social media or their grandparents broken by television. What has changed is the intensity. Television had a schedule, but algorithms are now personalized and endless. Where the evening news came once a day, TikTok serves you 20 stories in 20 seconds. The system has been refined, optimized, and made portable. Screen time continues to be the background hum of our entire lives, but now it's like a feed within us. Brain rot significantly affects Gen Z because Gen Z is now birthing children into this eternal cycle. Gen Z is the first generation to see most clearly how this content consumption affects a developing mind. They grew up as the test subjects, absorbing social media before anyone understood its long-term effects. Their social instincts and their way of processing reality has been shaped by fragmented, rapid-fire content loops. Absurdity and irony have become the very lens through which life itself is interpreted. It's our new language. Emotional expression is compressed into reaction images, TikTok sounds, and half-second edits. The result is a generation that feels deeply, but struggles to slow down long enough to articulate those feelings outside of the shorthand the internet provides. Gen Z was robbed of focus. They were born into this world with the ability to focus, but the cultural architecture around them collapsed attention into shorter and shorter bursts. They became adults in a world where being always online was the default. That kind of oversocialization reshaped everything from their mental health to their relationships, leaving many hyper-aware of the world, yet perpetually overstimulated by it. And now, as they begin raising children, Gen Z carries the weight of that experience. They fear for what Gen Beta may become. They know what it feels like to be consumed by the feed, to lose hours in the scroll, to measure self-worth against metrics that were never real in the first place. They are the generation to both suffer this full force of brain rot and recognize it for what it is. This is not the same reality we were born into. Checking social media now feels like using a stimulant. It triggers you with emotional feelings which are often negative. It feeds you with an algorithmic feed you did not exactly construct yourself. It feeds you what it expects engagement from. Opening your phone to scroll for a few minutes is like the modern version of how people used to step outside to smoke a cigarette for a hit of nicotine. Checking social media is the modern quick smoke, except this cigarette is a phone and the drug is not nicotine. Today's vice is filled with digital stimulants we cannot even physically comprehend. There is this jolt of novelty, a hit of social validation, a quick dosage of outrage that makes the world feel urgent. Like a quick smoke, it promises a small relief from boredom or discomfort, but the relief is brief, and the ritual keeps pulling you back. The difference is the chemistry is distributed across millions of tiny micro-interactions, across an algorithm that's optimized to discover which micro-interactions make you come back fastest. The only goal of the feed is to make you react. It's not there to make you happy, it's there to make you react. Content that triggers fear, anger, disgust, or envy gets amplified because those reactions are shareable. Recently, it seems like the word scrolling has gotten completely replaced with the word doom scrolling. You cannot scroll without a doom scroll. Doom scrolling feels like a trap. The stream keeps serving up items that raise your heart rate or tighten your jaw. Because those reactions are potent, the system assumes engagement means the same thing as success. You did not place this brick in building your algorithm. The algorithm finds a way to feed you rage bait. The result is a steady drip of emotional stimulation where the baseline of calm gets lowered. Then everyday life starts to feel comparatively flat. Physically and mentally, the rhythm of checking matters. That micro-checking, that modern quick smoke builds the habit loop where the body anticipates a hit. You notice phantom buzzes, a small anxiety you can't check, or an urge to see what happens that feels nearly chemical. It's a conditioned response that reduces our tolerance for low stimulation states like waiting in line or sitting with boredom. Those are precisely the moments where deeper thought and creativity often happen, and they're being crowded out. We cannot stand the feeling of silence. We need that quick smoke, even when we know it's lethal for our mental health. The concept of mental health in our society is defined largely by the extent to which an individual behaves in accord with the needs of the system, and does so without showing signs of stress. Ted Kaczynski. On the collective level, this compulsion reshapes public life. News and politics become snackable, outrage-driven cycles. Civic attention fragments into hundreds of transient flashpoints rather than sustained conversation. Trust becomes brittle because the fastest, loudest voices win attention, not the most careful or most accurate voices. Cultural memory compresses into meme-speed signals that are easier to react to than to process. So then nuance and historical context get eroded while spectacle grows. It's a tragic, dark comedy when you think about it. Humanity spent centuries climbing toward this moment, stacking invention upon invention until we built machines that can retrieve any piece of knowledge in existence in seconds. We carry in our pockets what past generations would have called a library of miracles. And yet, instead of standing in awe at this gift, most of us use it to watch 30-second reaction videos, AI-generated memes, or people lip-syncing to sounds we've already heard 1,000 times. They're not even lip-syncing to songs, they're lip-syncing to sounds and trends. We get outraged over street interviews that are obviously staged and scripted. Even though anyone with a basic level of intelligence can acknowledge these are fake, somehow most people still act as if these are real. The paradox of our age is that our minds are overstimulated but undernourished. The tools we've created could have expanded our capacity for wonder, but instead they've been optimized to collapse it into the smallest possible unit of attention. Instead of exploring the infinite, the endless scroll funnels us into a loop of repetition, designed to keep us there, endlessly grazing on fragments of distraction. This abyss does not stare back. The more profound our technology becomes, the less profound our use of it often is. We could spend hours diving into philosophy, history, or art with just a few taps, but instead we spend hours without even noticing they've passed. Our attention is sliced into 1,000 meaningless micro-moments. We are taking literal magic for granted. I think about how I spend my daily life. Every day I use a computer, always leveraging the internet to conduct research. In my full-time job, I use a computer. I explore the internet to learn more, traveling to different locations on the information superhighway. When work is over, I switch out laptops. In my personal pursuits, I use a computer. I explore the internet to learn more, traveling to different locations on the information superhighway. If someone from the past watched how I spend my daily life, they would think I was a wizard. They would think I access different dimensions of this reality. I do not see it this way. I'm numb to it. But an outsider may view this as extraordinary. I don't view it as anything different because I'm numb to it. When I am constantly bombarded with pages of literature, flashing advertisements, hours of videos, it does not astonish me in the way it would have astonished someone 200 years ago. I am used to it. I am living it. I am like someone who works at a casino. I'm unfazed by the constant flashing lights. I traveled to Las Vegas for the first time recently, and it was a surreal experience. You land in the airport, and there are already slot machines right there. Yes, right in the airport. There is 24/7 hedonism in this place. Everywhere you look is a vice. After walking through the streets, seeing drunk people stumble around with their overpriced drinks in their hands, and getting handed business cards for dirty and naughty services, I finally wriggle through all of this and get to my hotel. Within the hotel, there was a giant casino right there on the ground floor. People are drunk. People are high. They take endless drags off their cigarettes as they chain smoke one after the other, and they keep their sunken eyes glued to the slot machines. Servers bring them a continuous stream of beers. Air compressors from the ceilings are aggressively fueling more oxygen into the air. There are no windows or clocks anywhere. There is no daytime or nighttime. Everyone is in an eternal 24/7 simulation. These people aren't even thinking for a second how much money they're flushing down the toilet with every pull of the gambling machine levers. This is not a place for thinking or observing. Their eyes are bloodshot red. They're tired. But fortunately, there are Starbucks kiosks right there in the casino, so they can buy overpriced coffee and fuel their caffeine addictions, because this place has to include every single vice known to man. These people get their stimulants in so they can continue blowing their money as the machines suck them dry. And if the machines don't suck them dry, there's a number on those business cards they can call to get someone to suck them dry. The eyes of these gambling tourists tell a story, but not a great story. In the midst of the gambling addiction and substance abuse, there is nothing in those eyes. Seeing the eyes of these people is like looking into the cloudy, marbled eyes of a corpse. Nobody is home. It's like they are walking zombies, and some of them almost are zombies. They're almost corpses. You see these old people sitting at these machines, still not accepting the fact that getting old happens to people. They refuse to register any part of it, so they refuse to embrace any aspect of maturity itself. These are people who have gained none of the wisdom that should have come with age. The women carry decades of horrifying plastic surgery, and the men are living large by smoking cigars as their pointy nipples protrude through their polo shirts. They've had a successful life, working hard by keeping their money in the stock market, and now they're blowing their retirement savings on cheap thrills. They spent their whole lives keeping up with the Joneses, and now they are sticking it to the Joneses. The Joneses could never reach this level of having this much fun in life. To these people, this is living large. This annual trip to Las Vegas is what they've been waiting for their entire lives. With the endless, fleeting time they have in retirement, this is what they choose to do. This is how they want to spend their final years of existence. This is what it was all about. Maybe they've been to Vegas earlier in life. Maybe it left an impression on them. I don't know. These Vegas tourists are something else. They are surrounded by astonishing wonders of architecture and light shows, but they are numb to it all. They are not there to take it in. They are there to bust a quick nut of adrenaline on these machines. It's not even about winning the money. It's about the rush of fantasizing about winning that money. Even if the fantasy is just for a brief second, even if it makes them broke, their energy gets consumed. The machines are using them. I snap back out of my daydream. I come back to reality as the people I'm traveling with tell me, "Come on, live a little. Don't be such a stickler." Uh-oh. I didn't realize that my failure to gamble was making people uncomfortable. I hate making people uncomfortable. What do I tell them? Do I tell them I studied statistics in college, which is where I concluded gambling is a waste of money? No. That would sound arrogant. Do I make up something about how I have a family history of addiction and I'm not trying to risk anything? No. They'd get weird about it, and I don't want to make anyone feel bad about having fun. I better show these people I can have fun by consuming vices. And I better do it quick. I run to the bar and buy a beer. $30. Alright, whatever. I guess I can go without groceries this week. I get back to the group and I drink very slow, taking hours to nurse the beer, hoping they're so distracted with gambling that they think I'm actually drinking multiple beers. In the midst of their drunken gambling frenzy, they somehow see through my act. They know I've just been slowly drinking one beer for hours. They laugh and nudge me, telling me to get the stick out of my ass and loosen up. Uh-oh. My one beer does not even scratch the surface of how much the rest of them drank. I know I need to catch up with them, but I don't drink often. And if I have more drinks at the pace they're drinking, I might get a tummy ache. I'm offered a cigarette. I turn it down because I don't smoke. This is not looking good for me. Again, they tell me to live a little, laughing and egging me on to have some fun. Oh no. Oh God. I need to do something. I need to somehow prove to these people that I know how to have fun, and I better figure out something fast. But then something hits me. I remember I have a secret weapon. I finally find a solution to this. I pull out my phone, and I pull out the business card I received on the street. I triumphantly tell the people I'm with that I'm headed back to the hotel to meet up with an 80-year-old cross-dressing prostitute. Their smiles fade. They go silent. It appears I've maintained their respect. Excellent. I breathe a sigh of relief. I've proved to them that I know how to have fun. I go back to my hotel room and watch TV. The amazing thing about Las Vegas is this. Everywhere is now Las Vegas. In Vegas, you are hit with constant, continuous stimulation of the simulation. Lights everywhere, emotions everywhere. When you go on the internet, when you go on social media, you are entering the adventure of the wonderland of this 24/7 loosh farm. They are bombarded by positive and negative emotions. They are bombarded by fantasy, even if it lasts just a few seconds. People are hooked on this. It numbs them, but they are hooked on this. The Matrix presents a future dystopia where machines become more advanced than humans. The machines harvest energy from humans, keeping their bodies alive and functioning by keeping their minds plugged into a 24/7 simulated reality. If this science fiction film becomes a reality in our world, and if people among us are fully 100% conscious and aware this is happening, trust me, most people will want to be plugged into these machines. Most people will ask to be plugged into these machines. They will want to live in a simulated reality. They will want the machine to keep them alive. Las Vegas shows this explicitly. These tourists really think obeying the machines is what life is all about. They think this is living large. Even though they're slaves to the machine, they still think they're making their own decisions. They still think they have their own feelings. Our daily behavior on social media shows this implicitly. Users think they are getting the full glimpse of their outside reality. They think this is being aware. Even though they're slaves to the algorithm, they still think they've put down the bricks to build their algorithm. They still think they have their own feelings. Real life is tough. They need a break by gazing into the machine. And if ever, by some unlucky chance, anything unpleasant should somehow happen, why, there's always Soma to give you a holiday from the facts. And there's always Soma to calm your anger, to reconcile to your enemies, to make you patient and long-suffering. In the past, you could only accomplish these things by making a great effort, and after years of hard moral training, now you swallow 2 or 3 half-gram tablets, and there you are. Anybody can be virtuous now. Aldous Huxley. Brave New World. In Huxley's dystopian novel, all the members of society regularly take Soma, a narcotic tranquilizer to produce feelings of happiness. Soma is an opiate of the masses that replaces religion and alcohol. The state encourages the use of Soma, as it reduces unrest and subversive ideas to prevent war and ensure people are happy. While there are different interpretations of what Soma is supposed to represent, the truth of the matter is that Soma is a medium of brain rot. It numbs people, preventing them from embracing what is actually happening around them, accepting their sick society as normal. Our recreational use of the internet certainly reflects a sort of Soma, as it's something that numbs us in our emotional hits. I've almost started to view the negative externalities of normalized casual weed use as being the modern form of Soma. This is by no means a legality perspective, this is just a pragmatic perspective. What has this level of weed use offered us? When looking at the pros and cons its rampant use has had on society, we question how beneficial it really is for so many people to be using it so often. This is something that very obviously numbs people. Altered states of consciousness do bring altered perspectives, which is beneficial. But we must ask, how many hours of life have people spent fried out of their minds and glued to the couch in this brain rot haze? This Soma euphoria, not actually gaining any new insights from these altered perspectives. Numbing one's emotions through endless content consumption has become so extreme that we need to reflect on what's actually going on. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there is a positive perspective to this. Consider when someone steps out for a quick smoke, their quick adrenaline rush for a social media scroll, and they get outraged by what they see in their feed. Alright, pause there. They can feel something. They can feel that they are not numb. Their outrage is negative. Negative feelings are not positive, but navigating negative feelings is a part of what we experience as human beings. In the brain rot era, the bar is so low that at least still having emotions is something rather than nothing. People can still feel something rather than nothing. The best I've ever seen this described was in a magical place. Every year I attend a music festival that has outdoor camping. One year I got camped right next to this group of college dudes that I don't think slept that entire weekend. I distinctly remember one night coming back to camp to finally fall asleep, and these guys were continuing to be rowdy and partying hard. Yeah, get lit, guys. We spent the whole day walking for miles in the sun, and now it's 4 a.m., and most people are trying to sleep. But yeah, right now is the perfect time to go hard. These guys had huge tanks with them, and they were filling balloons one after the other and inhaling them, then going off on the revelations they were having. As I was trying to fall asleep, I kept waking up from these intoxicated words of wisdom. I won't specify what they were inhaling, but I'm sure you can guess. Now, the amount of balloons they were inhaling were way more than people should even consider in one night. Even the degenerates I've crossed paths with were more responsible than this. But these dudes dudes kept going one after the other, and they'd say things like, "Whoa, man, I'm thinking about the universe, and it's so crazy that there is something instead of nothing." As basic of an observation as this is, this insight really had an impact on them. But eventually, they finally hit something big. They uncovered a secret. They found the meaning of life. One dude inhaled a balloon, and he said, "Whoa, man, I can't believe it. I think I finally figured it out. Everything is in a constant state of happening, and that's why things happen." They were all gasping in amazement and going on and on about how insightful and groundbreaking this revelation was. The summary being that everything happens and that's why things happen. Now look, honestly, I completely get it. I understand they were going through something nobody else could comprehend but them. I was not experiencing what they were, but what I found profound in that moment was this. Despite how much they were damaging their brains, despite their chronic vitamin B deficiencies, despite how much they were killing off their brain cells and reducing down their mental processing power to a mere nothing, they were still experiencing something. This applied directly to their revelations. There is not nothing. There was never nothing. Even when something tries to get reduced to nothing, there is still something. No matter how severe society's brain rot gets, there is still the brain rot. The brain rot is still something. Hey, focus, man, focus. Sit still. Pay attention. Focus. Remember that? Growing up, school is a huge part of your reality. It's where you're supposed to learn how to navigate in society. I did alright in school, but I was never actually intelligent. I just devoted way more time to studying than the average student. I would study for hours upon hours to get an A on a test, while my fellow quote-unquote gifted classmates would just stroll into the test without studying to get their A's. I had a hyperfixation on doing well in school so I could get a decent college scholarship. It feels this was my main childhood goal. School was a game, and I just spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to play the game. As I would sit in class, hearing a teacher drone on about material, I would stare off into space and daydream. Then something in me would snap at me, and I'd tell myself to focus. I would try to pay attention so strongly, and I would focus so hard on focusing that my focusing on trying to focus would prevent me from actually focusing. The internal myth I would tell myself was that this was not the normal way people function in class. If this entire educational system is catered to the lowest common denominator, then surely my mind must be far, far below average. I secretly saw myself as mentally inferior, but of course I had no choice but to keep this perspective to myself. No matter how many good grades I got, I could not be convinced otherwise. My internal myth was always that I had a learning disability. But I knew I could not dwell on that because getting to college was the ultimate game I had to play. Sure, I had side quests like sports and girls, but my hyper-focus was ultimately just making college possible. When it came time to study for a test, I looked at my options. Since I viewed myself as having a learning disability, I had to approach this carefully. I could either devote more hours than I had time in a day reading all this material, which would be impossible, or I could more wisely optimize my time by memorizing key concepts and coming up with mnemonics to play the game of getting a better score on this test. Obviously, this has always been the flawed game of traditional education, or should we say, feducation. You are incentivized to rot your own brain through these pointless memorization exercises. I would finally complete a test, and of course I would walk away not retaining anything. But it was worth it, because I did what I had to do to get a good grade, meaning I invested in my future because I made a college scholarship more possible. I learned patterns. I created methods. I picked up on schemes. I learned how to play the game. And after 13 years of doing this, I finally got accepted into college. By the time I started college, I had these feelings of knowing I was not authentically qualified to be there. I felt I was not there by merits of intelligence, only by merits of being an imposter. Surely I must have a learning disability. I continued keeping these feelings a secret because I knew this was just another game I had to learn how to play. I had to come up with a new hyper-focus as motivation to play the game. Unfortunately, I had not considered any goals beyond this, because I was so focused on just getting in. Why did I work so hard to achieve this goal? Maybe I should have actually been developing a personality. Maybe I should have quit studying and created special interests. Maybe I should have come up with a lucrative dream job in my youth that I could be striving for. Instead, I decided to focus so much to the point where I lost track of focusing on life. Sometimes life feels like driving a car. You are required to pay attention to what is happening on the road. You are driving, so it is vital for your safety to pay attention and focus on the road. But something is going on in your back seat. Your passengers yell, "You just missed it. Why didn't you see it?" You say, "I'm not watching the back seat. I'm supposed to be watching the road." Other drivers on the road get furious and say that is your car. How do you miss something going on in your own car? What's wrong with you? And you're so confused as you tell them, "I'm trying to keep myself alive by focusing on the road while I'm driving." The concept of focus is something fascinating to consider. Focus used to mean how long you could hold a single thread of thought. Now it's about what you let into your mental field. In this new environment engineered for interruption, focus is an act of selective curation. It's the ability to choose which signals get to be considered urgent. Focus becomes a philosophical stance and a psychological skill. To focus is to set boundaries against commodified attention, to refuse the premise that every sensation requires an immediate reaction. And it shows up as these simple, tiny rituals, such as seeing a breath of boredom where thinking can grow. Focus is a game we need to learn how to play. It's a game we never stop playing. We are so drawn to games. Head up, gamer. Your headset is falling. Somehow, I never got into video games. I always viewed them as a waste of time, and I always saw them as brain rot. I have nothing against people who game. In fact, I've always been impressed by how much they're able to play them. I could never comprehend how they found the time to play for so many hours and still be able to accomplish so much in life. How could they find the focus for all of this? The rational perspective is that video games are bad for you. They're a waste of time. They're brain rot. That is the logical take on it. But the honest take is this: not getting into video games is one of my biggest regrets in life. In fact, I am less cultured because I never got into video games. To put it bluntly, I may have failed to relate to my fellow man. Among men of my generation, a major common denominator has been the video games we play, sometimes on our own, but oftentimes together. Video games have been the unifier. Men of completely different walks of life have found something common with the games they play. Men have come together playing these video games in person. Men have come together staying up late, gaming, and talking to each other as they work together to achieve goals both virtually and beyond. Because of that, lifelong friendships have formed from this. Guys from different parts of the country have been in contact for years, all because they met each other through a video game. Camaraderie and opportunities have flourished from the friendships formed by this common interest. What I theorize as being brain rot, these guys experienced is something that has undoubtedly made their lives better. It's never too late to start something new, but at this stage of life, I cannot envision myself picking up a controller. I've looked into it, and I've read up on it, but the thought of spending time gaming on a console or a PC makes me shudder, because I realize that has never been, and simply is just not me. My younger self found no interest in that, and my older self definitely does not find interest in that. As deep as I look into myself, I cannot see it being worth my focus. I found other things I value putting more focus into. Simply put, the ship has sailed on that interest. And though in hindsight I know I should have approached it differently when I was younger, I am now at peace with my current decisions and approach. There is no longer novelty in that, because today it would feel like I'm just robbing time from myself. I'm glad I grew up having these moments of being bored. I grew up without cable television, which, unlike today, was more significant back then. Anytime my family would travel, we would be in the hotel and immediately turn on the TV to flip through the cable channels and look for the most ridiculous things we could find. So, of course, we'd always land on TLC, the Learning Channel. It should have been called TBC, the Brain Rot Channel. It was like the modernized version of a circus freak show. We knew it was stupid. We knew it was brain rot. We knew it was insane that cable television was somehow a paid service. But there was still a certain kind of novelty by turning on the hotel TV and getting a quick taste of humanity's dumbest aspects. It was still worth our time for the laughs. Today, when I'm traveling and I get into my hotel room, I'll turn on the TV and flip channels, but the novelty is gone. It is still brain rot, but now it feels like the hourglass of life is spilling like an avalanche. As wild as this sounds, I feel cheated whenever I turn on the hotel TV and flip through cable television. Here I am expecting something that should ideally be of premium quality, considering how much the service costs. And yet, I'm bombarded with low-effort reality show content, interrupted over half the time by advertisements. As I've gotten older, my goals in life get more refined. The brief taste of novelty I could get from television or video games now feels like something that grabs my aspirations and tries to rip them to shreds. But I have no pedestal to stand on. The irony is that there actually is a lot of content I enjoy that has brought me so much happiness and laughter in life that I will be the first to call brain rot. I enjoy sitcoms for the time period of American history they represent. Sitcoms are the original brain rot. They're basically mental fast food with their predictable setups, canned laughter, and the same characters wearing different sweaters for 10 seasons. You're not supposed to think, you're supposed to consume. The laugh track is a cattle prod saying, hey, this part is funny, now laugh. And so, like Pavlov's dog, you're reminded to laugh. It's a psychological conditioning program wrapped in a cozy living room set. You think you're relaxing after work, but what you're really doing is outsourcing your emotions to a soundboard. And people loved it. They begged for it. After all, thinking is uncomfortable. Reflection is painful. It's easier to watch Ross Geller screw up another relationship than look in the mirror and realize he's done more with his life than you. Sitcoms sold the American dream as if it were a laughable inconvenience. Dumb slob husband, nagging wife, wacky neighbor, a ritual of mediocrity to remind you that your life isn't so bad. At least you're not Kramer. But sitcoms also represented some form of originality. There was more creativity than reactivity. There was still some spark in Hollywood. Today, Hollywood is being bankrupted by boredom. It outsourced its imagination to spreadsheets and focus groups, and now it pretends that originality equals risk management. Every green light is the same. Another prequel, another origin story, another reimagining of something that already had a spine. It's as if the industry discovered a formula for turning feelings into franchises, and then decided to print receipts forever. Our most creative minds sold themselves out. Culture is eating itself. Look at the Hollywood menu. Sequels, spin-offs, cinematic universes, reboots, legacy installments where 50-year-old actors recreate their 20-year-old charm for the normies who still buy nostalgia. The studios do not want surprises. They want predictable returns. If your movie can be broken down into ROI-friendly icons and moments that can be sold as merchandise, then congratulations, you're a commercially successful cultural asset now. You're shelf material. You're sterilized. The audience asked for comfort and got a lifetime subscription to Deja Vu. People don't want to be challenged. They want to be patted on the head by a trailer and told which feelings are safe. Streaming turned everything into a buffet of familiarity. We scroll, we click, and we consume the easiest plotline like a palate cleanser between anxieties. Originality and creativity are too expensive and risky. Corporations prefer to monetize the past because the past is safe. Nostalgia has become a financial instrument, so you get endless variations on the thing you liked when you were young, because that's where the data says you were the happiest and the most valuable consumer. Hollywood is dying. That's good. Let it die. For decades, they pumped out glossy fairy tales to keep you sedated. It was propaganda served with popcorn. And now the mask has slipped. People are finally bored enough to look elsewhere. If you stop worshipping the Hollywood machine, you stop letting it define what meaning looks like. You realize stories don't need billion-dollar budgets. They need honesty. They can come from YouTube, or TikTok, or some freak with a podcast in his garage. The gatekeepers lost their monopoly, and that's terrifying for them, but great for everyone else. There's always been a lot of brain rot in Hollywood, but did Hollywood ever address brain rot? Well, actually, yes. It threw it as hard as it could right in your face, and nobody drew that portrait sharper, stupider, and more honest than the kings of brain rot. It's so stupid that it's genius. Hear me out. Beavis and Butthead are literally the epitome of passive consumption. Think about the show's premise. Two vacant kids planted in front of a screen, their entire interior life made of TV static, music videos, and an endless loop of the same stupid impulses. The show holds a screen up to itself. You watch Beavis and Butthead watching. The characters reduce culture to immediate laughs and grunts, and expose how media trains the viewer to react before thinking. They consume entertainment like water. They're enamored in it. They were birthed from an early era that foreshadowed society. Beavis and Butthead prefigured modern reaction culture. Before reaction videos were a business model, these two degenerates made back-of-the-couch commentary a comedic frame. The show was effectively an animated reaction channel long before YouTube monetized that format. Their commentary was minimal, repetitive, and perfectly optimized for short attention spans. The literal blueprint for how content would later be engineered by algorithms to keep eyeballs watching. They are the archetype. Two dumb mouths, one endless stream, zero reflective capacity. It's the human software update we got with cable and then with the internet. Since the stories we see in the media are written by adults, children will always be presented as far more intelligent than they actually are. Not this show. This show was realistic. These characters work as satire, but the reason they endure is because they're unironically the most accurate portrayal of adolescence ever put on screen. Strip away the outdated references, and what you're left with is the raw shape of teenage existence. Boredom, obsession with stimulation, shallow but all-consuming interests, and a complete lack of self-awareness. Teenagers across generations are basically wired the same. Their world is small but feels infinite. Every stupid idea feels like genius. And the pursuit of cheap laughs or fleeting thrills defines the day. Beavis and Butthead are stuck in their own heads, endlessly entertained by nonsense, and convinced that random chaos is the only thing worth caring about. These characters don't grow, because most teens don't want to grow. They want to hover in the chaos of their moment. They don't plan. They don't reflect. They don't evolve. And if you look at teens in the 90s or today, nothing has changed. The content medium evolves, but the behaviors repeat. On the surface, they look like two empty heads bouncing off cheap stimuli. But looking deeper, they're doing something almost heroic. Through it all, they are entertained. They are not numbed or apathetic from the content they consume. Look, the bar is so low, at least they still have something to say. They still feel, they register, they respond. In a culture that prizes curated distance and polished indifference, that is a radical act. Adolescence is a tiny, intense economy of sensation. Everything matters because the world is still untested. Beavis and Butthead are a blueprint for how raw attention and a dumb idea can become a cultural object. These two characters can still create. The kids with the lowest production values often innovate the loudest. When the mainstream becomes a museum of its own nostalgia, the margins become the laboratory. Beavis and Butthead prove that feeling is not dead. Even cheap feelings are still feelings. Even nothing is still something. In a world that trained us to mute our instincts for marketability, two idiots howling at a TV remind us that raw human reaction survives. It's not sophisticated art, but it's real. It's the small, shameless acts that eventually push culture into new territory. So they create and they feel, and this scares us. As unbelievable as this sounds, they may be operating at a higher level of intelligence and innovation than our future generations are on track to become. This is our fear, and this is terrifying. The attention span of modern adolescents is even shorter than the attention span of these two fart knockers. In the United States, there has been an alarming decline in test scores for school-age students. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, sometimes called the nation's report card, reports that 12th grade reading and math scores have dropped to record lows. In reading, average scores are at the lowest since the assessment began. In math, it's about the lowest since 2005. About 45% of high school seniors were below basic in math, and about 33% were below basic in reading. Think about how low the bar is for basic. Think about the magnitude of what this represents. It does not necessarily reflect a lack of intelligence. It may reflect a basic lack of ambition. And the worst part is that it's not even their fault. It's the world we gave them. Their attention is fragmented. Their curiosity is shallow, and their learning competes with constant streams of dopamine hits. In a society fueled by brain rot, the very act of focusing on complex ideas or wrestling with difficult concepts becomes a kind of resistance. And yet, the youth are deeply attuned to short-form realities that their minds are trained more to react than to reflect. The gap in scores is a symptom of a culture that rewards immediacy over depth. This is not normal. Social media is such an inaccurate term. It's hardly social anymore, because it's just an algorithm we're passively scrolling through. This weird form of content consumption has put Gen Z in an unusual form of oversocialization. What makes this unprecedented for Gen Z is the developmental timing. They're the first generation in human history to come of age inside a state of permanent oversocialization. They literally grew up inside social media. They could not escape it. Humans are wired to calibrate themselves against a small circle, but Gen Z grew up calibrating against millions. Every post, every trend, every opinion from anywhere in the world becomes part of the social mirror. It's no longer just about keeping up with the peers in your high school. It's about keeping up with peers around the world simultaneously. The sense of normal becomes elastic, overwhelming, and impossible to meet. And this over-socialization has strange effects. On one hand, Gen Z is hyper-aware of cultural nuance, politics, and identity in ways earlier generations couldn't have imagined. On the other hand, they're paralyzed by the endless comparisons and contradictions that come with being constantly visible. Their social brain never gets to power down. It's always being watched and always performing. No generation before has had its developmental years shaped by this kind of constant global algorithm-mediated exposure. It's a paradox. They are more connected and more isolated than ever. Endless opportunity for expression is also endless surveillance. What looks like freedom of choice is actually the narrowing tunnel of algorithmic prediction. The death of social media and the birth of the algorithm, the For You feed, was the initiation of a hive mind mentality. Despite our methods for individual expression, we are becoming less inclined to think independently. When TikTok was new, I would see these trending dances that everyone would mimic. People legitimately thought, yes, this is valuable, this is necessary, other people will want to see this. I would see these videos of people doing something, and the comments would present questions exuding an unbelievable lack of basic sentience. People stopped thinking for themselves. For example, a TikTok would present someone showing how to make a parfait using strawberries. You would open the comments and see multiple people ask things like, "Can I use blueberries for this?" Now, it may seem insignificant, but this behavior was extremely common to the point where it was shocking. It was like, why was this even worth asking? Why couldn't you have just tried doing that yourself? Why couldn't you have just used common sense? How exactly does this reflect on our society that people have nearly zero independent thoughts? TikTok blew up years before the use of mainstream AI, but the construction of the hive mind paved a sinister path. A recent study from MIT's Media Lab examined the effects of using large language models on cognitive function during essay writing tasks. Researchers divided participants into 3 groups, one using only ChatGPT, one using a search engine, and one relying solely on their own brains. They measured brain activity, analyzed essay quality, and tested memory retention. To put the study's conclusions in plain terms, dependency on the hive mind fueled brain rot. It seems the evolution of social media is in part to blame for paving the path of this kind of behavior. The original promise of social media was autonomy. You chose who to follow. You curated your own feed. You built a digital community reflective of your interests. The shift to algorithmic feeds inverted that relationship. Now we don't choose the content chooses us. The For You feed manufactures identity instead of reflecting identity. What feels like discovery is often just statistical mass behavior, repackaged and served back to us as though it were uniquely tailored. A sound goes viral, and suddenly millions are lip-syncing the same words. How is this conditioning us? A meme circulates, and language itself reshapes to fit its rhythm. How is this conditioning us? What looks like creativity is often just subtle variations of the same loop. Granted, there is nothing new under the sun, and creativity has always been a remix of creations that came before them. However, what we now deem creative feels a lot different. Independent thought vanishes slowly, replaced by the reflex to replicate what the feed rewards. It homogenizes our attention. It collapses diversity of thought into sameness of output. We lose the essential solitude that allows us to think without an imagined audience hovering over our shoulder. The imaginary audience effect is a psychological concept describing the belief that other people are constantly watching and judging you. It's especially common in adolescence, and it's a normal stage of development. In past generations, this was mostly confined to a small group, a small stage where you felt scrutinized even if no one was really paying attention. But now that stage has no walls. Social media turned the imaginary audience into a real audience, quantified by likes, views, and comments. Every post feels like a performance. Every scroll feels like a reminder that someone else is more rich or more attractive than you. The adolescent fear of being watched has merged with the adult compulsion of actually being watched. This expansion of the imaginary audience effect has rotted our brains because it never lets us step outside of performance. We curate ourselves for invisible crowds, even in private moments. We internalize the gaze of the algorithm, imagining how things would look online before they even happen. In an over-socialized society, we are never truly alone with our thoughts. We are always imagining the audience. We are psychologically unwell. Gang stalking is a term used to describe the pattern where an individual believes they are being systemically followed and surveilled by a coordinated group. This can be real, but it's often just something that is perceived by people we consider to be mentally unwell. Clinically and socially, it's a sensitive topic because genuine harassment does happen, but many reports also intersect with paranoia and the human tendency to find intentional patterns and randomness. The parallel to our over-socialized algorithmic era is unsettling. Even people who would never call themselves targets of coordinated harassment now live inside a cultural architecture that produces many of the same psychological conditions that led to the gang stalking narratives. A pervasive sense of being watched and an expectation that private moments will be surfaced and judged. When every action can be observed, recorded, and screenshotted, and recontextualized by strangers, the mind learns to look for signs of coordination and threat. Algorithms amplify this. They give the impression of intimate knowledge by surfacing content that feels eerily specific, which can be experienced as evidence that someone is watching you. Social feedback mechanisms reward pattern seeking. Posts about being targeted gain engagement, which normalizes suspicion and teaches others to interpret ambiguity as malice. This creates a social climate where distrust is the default setting. So many of the feelings that once belonged to a handful of genuinely persecuted people have bled into everyday life. The result is a culture in which paranoia is both more visible and more contagious. People interpret normal social friction as targeted campaigns. The erosion of trust itself is corrosive. It pushes people into echo chambers where their fears are reinforced, and it makes meaningful collective problem solving almost impossible. Time and time again, our brains rot. But where did this term brain rot even come from? Henry David Thoreau is often credited with articulating the earliest concepts of this term. In Walden, he lamented the ways society's obsession with wealth, status, and constant busy work distracts the mind from genuine reflection and the richness of simply being alive. He warned against the kind of overstimulation and compulsive engagement with the world that leaves the soul fatigued, arguing that people spend their lives draining themselves for trifles, instead of cultivating a connection with nature. Of course, Thoreau himself was not without criticism. One point often raised is that while he wrote about self-reliance, he was living with his mother for most of his adulthood. There is more to unpack here, but critics argue that this undermines his claims of total independence and the validity of his experiment in solitary reflection. It raises a paradox similar to what we see in today's conversations about brain rot, the tension between ideals and the messy, imperfect reality of living within society. Can we really critique brain rot when we're so enamored in brain rot? What have you created in your life? What legacy are you leaving behind? I am not a father, but I have a high level of respect for those who are bringing children into this world right now. They are taking on a major responsibility and navigating one of the most complex landscapes in human history. On one hand, it makes sense to keep the children away from devices and limit the brain rot. On the other hand, keeping children away from these devices may make them socially and culturally handicapped. It restricts a way for them to gain knowledge. Technology is both the poison and the cure. To raise a child without screens is to risk isolating them from the very language of their peers, the memes and trends that form a shared culture. Yet to fully embrace screens is to risk fracturing their attention spans before it even has a chance to develop, conditioning them to expect stimulation every few seconds. This is a paradox no previous generation of parents has had to face. Gen Z parents are going to be tasked with teaching children how to coexist with a technological environment that no one fully understands. These kids are the first to grow up entirely inside of algorithmic ecosystems, and their parents are learning in real time what it means to set boundaries in a world that has none. It is a responsibility that goes beyond the household, because the choices made now will ripple forward, shaping how the next generation thinks, feels, and connects. Modern parenthood now requires raising a citizen of two worlds, the physical one that has always existed, and the digital one that is still in its early stages of being written. To shield too much risks leaving them unprepared, and to allow too much risks leaving them over-socialized. It's less about choosing one or the other, and more about finding a balance in a landscape where balance has never truly existed before. There is nothing the world has gone through like this before. Nothing. So what's the deal with all of this? What's the deal? Many of us are fed up. We're done. We are absolutely done. We've cut out this endless scroll from our lives. We've moved away from brain rot. We've cut social media to a minimal use. We're already seeing the death of using Instagram for personal use. Posting pictures of yourself on there just feels cringe and performative now. We're done. I get this uneasiness when I try to have a relaxing morning, sitting in my local cafe, reading a book on my iPad. As I'm reading, I realize I may be learning too slowly by reading just one source. Perhaps I'm missing out on more information by only reading one book. I start switching between tabs, searching for more information where my curiosity takes me. I can't learn fast enough. I need to switch between tabs faster. And ultimately, in my quest for knowledge, I've learned nothing, because my mind was all over the place. Alright, let's decompress for a second. We sit in silence. We begin to appreciate the silence. In this overstimulated world, we begin to value solitude. We go outside. We touch some grass. We sit in the sun. We meditate. We close our eyes and simply exist in this default setting of reality we were born into. But in this solitude, we fear something. Are we just doing nothing? Are we falling behind? Are we throwing time away that could be spent learning? Life is short and there is an infinite amount of knowledge out there. So are we throwing our time away by just sitting here in silence? We then realize a strange paradox. Our brains are not advancing in solitude. Is this solitude the real brain rot? Is this removal of brain rot just another form of brain rot itself? Some poor phoneless fool is probably sitting next to a waterfall somewhere, totally unaware of how angry and scared he's supposed to be. Duncan Trussell. Our culture has trained us to measure time by productivity and information intake, so when we sit in silence, the absence of stimulation feels like failure. It feels like we are missing out, letting life slip through our fingers, falling behind in the race of those still plugged in. Maybe the paradox is the point. What if solitude is not brain rot, but the necessary counterbalance to it? Brain rot thrives on acceleration, on the idea that every moment must be filled, every thought captured, every feeling converted into content. Solitude resists that logic. It insists that existence has its own worth apart from the noise. The anxiety that silence feels wasteful is the echo of the same system we're trying to escape. The flawed system told us that our thoughts are raw material to be harvested. To see solitude as nothing is to see it through the very lens of brain rot. To embrace it as presence, as recalibration, is to reclaim the original human experience of simply being. Maybe the paradox resolves by realizing that silence teaches us a different kind of focus. In stillness, the brain is not rotting. Instead, it is repairing. It is remembering how to belong to the world without needing to process it into infinite fragments of distraction. It is relearning the art of enough. If we are looking for a solution, maybe that's it. The radical acceptance of enough. The rediscovery that life is not meant to be consumed like a feed. Brain rot promised us endless stimulation, endless novelty, and endless growth. However, it robbed us of the capacity to sit in the miracle of what already exists. When we pull away from the noise, we are not wasting time. We are entering time as it really is. We're stepping into the long, slow rhythms that our ancestors lived by. Rhythms that our nervous systems still crave, even if our screens have trained us to fear them. In the absence of noise and solitude of silence, we experience sunlight, breath, stillness, and connection. We realize the solution is not a matter of escaping, but instead a form of returning. Return to the body, return to the earth, return to the raw experience of being alive. The death of brain rot will be slow. It will look quiet. It will look ordinary. It will look like young people rediscovering hobbies that don't need an audience, conversations that don't need to be recorded, walks that don't need to be tracked, moments that don't need to be posted. Advancement will require living lives that are invisible to the algorithm, but unforgettable to the soul. If you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. The importance of being human is in the fact that we can still choose, we can still step away, we can still claim our time back from the scroll, and give it to the silence, to presence, to each other. No matter how hard it may be, we can still simply exist. This is how brain rot changed Gen Z forever. We entered an adventure of learning that brain rot did not break us. Brain rot made us realize there is something within ourselves.